You are now tuned in to Not Without Alonzo.
You know, you're one of the few cats I've met in a long time that remotely remember that you was a little younger in the 70s than I was. But you about 15, 16.
Yeah, I was, in the 70s I was like 10 and 75, okay. So.
You were 10 and 75?
Yeah.
Some teachers, I was 75, I was getting out of high school, so I was 8 years older than you are. So I was just leaving high school. But again, because the times are so different, they became something to emulate and right. Something to grow from, because you had to be there to really appreciate it. Talk to your mom. But as you were saying, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, everybody's mama's 28 nowadays.
Everybody's mama 28.
Yeah. Okay. Talk to your mama. She was born in 1998.
I tell the motherfucker, I said, man, I used to be one of my jokes. Ask your mama about Alonzo. Now ask your grandma about Alonzo. Your grandmama knew who I am, goddammit. So, we were in high school. I remember at Centennial, we were trying to lock. We were trying, lock. We wasn't popping yet. Because, and people think it's all the same. It's not the same. You showed us briefly a minute ago, there are different ways. It looks the same to a novice. But if you're really into it, you'll realize that it's totally different. And even today, I see guys that call themselves pop locking, but they're not as hard, as crisp as the AKs or the Anthony Kings or even the one-armed bandits. What I'm used to seeing, okay, because our guys they did their thing. It was a real hit, hit on the beat. These guys nowadays, it's like a little slap. It's not a hit. It's a slap.
Well, that has to do with the music. I mean, when you pop to like Roger Troutman or Zapp or Parliament, you have that real bass and you have those waves. So your body is going, and at the time too, it was a lot more fresher. So everybody was trying to be different. They weren't trying to emulate what they saw in the movies. Once the movies came out, you had different generations after that emulated Shabba-Doo or Shrimp or Taco, whoever their favorite was in the movie, and they kind of stayed in that, and that became the end of all. And but what's funny is like, LA is the antenna to the world. So everybody comes here with their companies and stuff like that for their advertisements and their music and movies and so on and so forth. But he touched on something, and I want to emulate. And this is where the record player and the jukebox became the turntables. New York, they were breaking, scratching it. And in Chicago, they were housing and mixing in, blending acapellas with instrumentals. LA, they were speeding it up. They were speeding up 33 records on 45 speed. And Soul Train, when Don Cornelius did not want those crazy kids, the lockers, on his show when they moved to LA from Chicago. And also Motown moved from Detroit at around the same time. And it teamed up with the Whitfield. And but anyway, Soul Train moved out here. He couldn't afford Motown artists. He couldn't afford the posh dancers that he wanted, like an American Bandstand or the Chicago dancers with the New York, suits and really social dances. So he was like, okay, he had no choice but to put the lockers on Soul Train. And Soul Train aired, and it blew up, and it wasn't because of the B-rate artists. They wanted to see what those crazy kids were going to do on Soul Train. So that being said, was the first time that the nationally you got to see the lockers. You saw Rerun, you saw Shabba-Doo, you saw Don Campbell, Greg Camelot Jr., who invented the move. You saw Slim the Robot, and then you saw all the females who were doing it. And there was a lot of social dances at the same time: the mashed potato, the camel walk, and the funky chicken, the funky penguin. But locking, because it was televised, and then as the turntable came into play, New York was emulating what they saw on Soul Train. So all these cross your arms, the points, the up rock, those were moves that the lockers were doing on Soul Train. They just put it to a break. Because the DJ was like do 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 do. So you could lock to it, but because that break just kept breaking, that's the reason why they call it breaking or b-boying or boyoing is how it really started. And the term hip hop didn't come into play until Africa Bambaataa in 1980, who actually named it hip hop. Prior to that in New York, they were calling it rockin'. Rocking the mic, rocking the turntable, rocking the stage, rocking the rooftops. She was rocking it. But rocking was already a word like rock and roll, rockers. So there was up rock, there was top rock, there was body rock. So many rocks that were in it.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? But they're emulating what they saw on Soul Train. The Electric Boogaloos. Pete and Sam, Electric Boogaloos, Poppin' Pete and Boogaloo Sam moved from Fresno, the Bay Area, down to L.A., and they introduced this thing called Poppin', Electric Boogaloo. And everybody was locking at that time. Okay. So they wanted to get into popping, but they couldn't lock and pop at the same time. The locking was too fast of a dance, and popping was kind of to the funk part. You know, it was more to the down part. It wasn't really a boom, bap, boom, bap. It was more like a boom, tsh, boom, tsh, boom, tsh. Even in the trendy era, we didn't dance to all those doom, tsh, doom, 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 doom. We just danced to the drive of it. But anyway, so they just broke down locking moves.
This is a dance to this white dude I've been all my life.
Right?
You Irish or some shit or what?
No, well, actually, it's funny because my mom's American. I felt like I Love Lucy was about me. Because my mom was American redhead and my dad was from Brazil. My dad was from Rio de Janeiro. Now, my dad has a strong history prior to, he died in 1982, God bless him. But he came here and introduced Bossa Nova with Sergio Mendes, Jobim, Jean Gilberto, Bonfa, Walter Wonderlay. They introduced Bossa Nova to America in 1961 at Carnegie Hall. And then later on, with did a thing for the Kennedys at Lincoln, and introduced Bossa Nova, which was half jazz and half samba. Okay. And samba was like the blues of Brazil. And then they just mixed American jazz with it and created Bossa Nova. And what's funny about Bossa Nova, and it was like one of the earlier fusions of music. And then you fast forward to the 80s, and this is a secret that, no one knew for a long time, that the secret recipe to Sade was mixing Bossa Nova and Caribbean rhythms.
Yeah, I'm going through it in my head right now. Yep.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So she fusioned three musics.
Crazy. No shit, okay.
So it's the fusion. So when we came in the 80s, it was all about fusion because those turntables could bring in jazz, you can bring in house, you can bring in reggae, you can bring in beatnik, and you could bring in whatever that 10-second is. So when you go back into the late 80s, what they call the golden era of hip-hop, they were sampling what? Funk, jazz, big bands, opera. Right. Now it's like the plugins are unbelievable with what they can. They're taking natural sounds to like garage sounds. Right? Yeah, exactly. But that's the evolution, and we got to accept the evolution. I mean, all of it has always been an experiment. I mean, it's the hippie movement, the British invasion was an experiment. It was as they were trying to program human beings into stepping away from their family culture and traditions and religion and all that. They were pushing this drugs, and they were pushing sex, drugs, and rock and roll is what they were pushing. And then as they were pushing this, and it worked, but what they didn't realize that music was going to open up the minds, the consciousness of human beings. So through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, these messages were coming in through music. While they thought they were just doing rock and roll or punk rock, or they were just song and dance men, they were releasing messages. Whether it was Marvin Gaye, whether it was James Brown. I mean, James Brown, he had white people singing, "Sing It Loud, I'm black and I'm proud." You know what I'm saying? That's some balls.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?